Well, normally when I speak, I do not use notes. But because of the gravity of the words that I have to deliver today, if you will permit me, I'm going to use a manuscript. Today marks a new day for Christians and people of goodwill in Oklahoma. I pray it will be remembered as a day when precious human life was once again elevated in our minds. A day when life began to matter. The psalmist captures it this way. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. And we have all heard this verse, and I suspect we all pretty much know it well. But that is actually the problem. We know it well. Some 8 months ago, people began approaching me about running for governor. Providentially, about that same time, I made new acquaintances who said they were abolitionists. They were not using terms like pro-life, terms I was familiar with. They were not advocates of passing a 20-week ban. They were not hoping for the arrival of the magical Supreme Court justice who would finally overturn Roe versus Wade and end this Holocaust. No, instead they were condemning those ideas as unjust, not biblically consistent, and thus not honoring to God. Now initially, I must admit to you, I bristled. After all, who were these people to be quoting verses to me, a pastor? They were quoting verses like Isaiah 10, 1 and 2, where God says, woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees, to deprive the poor of their rights and withhold justice from the oppressed of my people, making widows their prey and robbing the fatherless. Now, after explaining to me that passing a law that banned the murder of an innocent baby after 20 weeks, in a sick sort of way, was actually permitting the murder of innocent babies up to 20 weeks. It was then I saw the error in my thinking. God's holy word was right, and I was wrong. Any law that allowed the continued murder of innocent children at any age was indeed the very unjust law Isaiah was referring to. Thinking I had been doing right, I had actually been doing wrong. I'd been ignorantly violating God's word. In other words, I had sinned. I sincerely repented and asked God for His forgiveness for my terrible sin. But it did not stop there. Recently, while talking with a friend, I confessed that I really do not grieve enough for the babies being murdered every day in Oklahoma. I told him that I am now working on consciously sensitizing my mind to the fact that on most days of the week, some 15 to 20 babies are dismembered or scalded to death right here in good old Oklahoma. I must learn to see this as the unspeakable evil that it is. Now remember, this happens in heavily Christian Oklahoma, where there are 1.3 million evangelical Christians, where there is a church building on every corner practically, where millions are spent on church soundboards, lights, and video equipment, where we are surrounded by all the outward trappings of Christianity. Yet, we remain silent in the church to the screams of these babies being butchered. I confess to you that I do not have all of the answers as to why I don't grieve like I should about this. But I have asked God to forgive me and help me to correct this evil. But it didn't stop there. As I began to examine my own actions in the attempt to reconcile my previous pro-life position with abolition, I had to confront other errors in my life, like thinking I was doing good by incrementally slowing abortion through regulatory measures like a 20-week pain-capable bill. True, that would have saved the some 2.8% of the babies murdered after 20 weeks. But that's a good thing, right? But what about the 97.2% of the babies murdered before 20 weeks? By supporting an incremental approach to ending abortion, I was implicitly assenting to the idea that it was legal to murder babies who didn't fit into a regulatory scheme. Does God permit us to make that call when He makes crystal clear, "Thou shalt not murder"? He did not qualify that command with, "unless it's done legally and before 20 weeks or after a mother views an ultrasound." Every follower of Jesus must emphatically shout, "No!" The second thing that I had to reevaluate is because of my love for our founding era, I'd allowed myself to think this issue could only be resolved through some political process in Washington, D.C. But then I came to see that since Washington, D.C. believes it has all the power, they only make rules that suit them. Our only job, according to them, is simply to submit. Yet this was completely contradictory to what I believed and was teaching in sermons and seminars and presentations all over the country. Yet there I was, believing that we had to wait for the perfect sequence of events before we could magically end abortion. We have been waiting for this miracle for 44 years, and 60 million babies have been slaughtered in the meantime. What do you think our founders would have done by now? It is time for Oklahoma to end this Holocaust now. Not later, now. Now, as others have already said, I am the only abolitionist running for governor. But I'm not doing this because it is some new and clever way to get elected. No. I am running to repair that which I had ignorantly assisted. I unknowingly participated in helping to create this Holocaust. We all did at one time or another. Now we have the duty to fix it. Of course, some are accusing me of being a single-issue candidate. All he cares about is abortion. Well, that is simply ludicrous. My campaign platform includes a whole array of issues. But if we cannot get the issue of life correct, does it even matter if we create the healthiest and most prosperous economy in the world? A culture that is willing to murder the most innocent among them is capable of any sort of evil. Jesus asked, "What is the profit of gaining the whole world but losing your own soul in the process?" We have the blood of innocent murdered babies on our hands. Mary Fallon, Todd Lamb, Mick Cornett, and all of the other candidates, including me, have blood on our hands. The church in Oklahoma has blood on its hands. In a moment, I plan to walk right up the road here to the clinic that is open because our governor vetoed a bill that would have at least attempted to restrict physicians from being able to perform abortions. But on my way there, I will walk past a church we reached out to in searching for a place to hold this rally. Even though that church sits only 500 or so feet from that clinic, and even though they claim to be pro-life, I noticed this morning as I drove by, they have a slogan on their sign, their marquee, that says, Jesus loved you when you were in the womb. Even though all of that is true, the pastor of that church made it crystal clear that we could not use his parking lot for this rally. We were told they didn't want to get political. Let me be clear. The murder of an innocent baby is not and must not and never be a political issue to the church. Shame on us. Shame on us for ever allowing it to be political. I call upon that pastor to repent like I have for not loving his neighbor enough to do something about it. I'll bet he would want someone to help him if his skull was being crushed, or he was being dismembered, or he was being scalded to death. People shake their heads and call me crazy for saying that we should defy Washington and end abortion. They will call you crazy as well if you stand with me. But this simply proves that they do not have a clue about our founding documents and have bought into the lie that the federal government holds all the power. These people are the same ones who will make you more submissive to unjust political power if they get the chance. These fast-talking politicians want you to think they are tough, but when they are faced with one single politically connected lawyer in a black robe who says no, these tough guys fold up immediately like a cheap suit. Some of these same fast-talking politicians even misuse scriptures like Romans 13 to scare people into submitting to evil rulings from the Supreme Court. Let me ask you, were the Hebrew midwives wrong when they defied Pharaoh and saved little Jewish baby boys? Was Daniel wrong when he defied the king and prayed anyway? Was Jesus wrong when he healed a cripple on the Sabbath? In all of those cases, the existing political power said they were wrong. No, these leaders were righteously unwilling to be patient and cooperate with a wicked system. Like them, we must stand up against evil even when our government calls it legal. Paul said it a while ago. Nothing morally wrong should ever be legally right. I will be silent no longer. And I suspect that many of you will not either. When Washington, D.C. issues an unjust ruling as a Christian and as a pastor, I will openly defy them in the highest traditions of our history. Just as James Madison encouraged in 1798 when he said that the states have the right and are duty-bound to interpose and arrest the evil of an out-of-control federal government. It is time to call Roe versus Wade what it is, evil, and do what Madison said and arrest it. Just as the citizens of South Carolina in 1832 did when they openly defied Washington, D.C. over the Tariff of Abominations. Just as the Wisconsin Supreme Court did when it nullified the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 and protected the liberty of any slave who made it to Wisconsin. Just as the Christian abolitionists did in the 1800s when they demanded an end to the evil slave trade. They did not call for a reduction of whippings, or that only a sterilized whip could be used, or that only a slave over 20 years of age could be whipped. No, they demanded an immediate end to the practice. And just as Martin Luther King Jr. did when he called for an end to the evil of racial segregation and the abuse of civil rights in the middle of the 20th century. You see, our movement to abolish abortion is truly in the finest traditions of our republic, and you and I starting today, are writing the next chapter in that battle between good and evil, light and darkness. We must not delay one more moment. Babies' lives are at stake. Folks, now I am going to walk right up there to that clinic. And with a few of our volunteers, I'm going to pray for the church in Oklahoma and its leaders to awaken. And I'm going to pray that somehow the doors of that place are forever closed.